LinkedIn profile, show Lynn some support. Lynn from LMA Consulting is our guest. Thanks so much for coming today, Lynn. Really appreciate you. Thanks
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me. Excited to
That's
be here.
I know it's got we had a great podcast episode. It's coming out here real soon, and we're like, I think this is such. I was talking to Jason about it. This is such a good topic for anyone. If you have grant experience, dip your toes in a little bit. You've seen success, or never even tried it at all. It's a really great time to use these different opportunities because there's a tremendous amount of private, and we'll get into that money right now available to folks. So just happy to have you, Lynn. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right. All right. Good to see everybody that we know and good to see some new folks as well. So that's always that gets us pretty pumped. My name's Trevor Nelson. This is my business partner, Jason Ledlow. We're HGA Fundraising, the most profitable and mission-focused auction items in fundraising. But we're not going to talk about auction items today. We're going to give one away, though, at the end. However, we're going to talk about grant fundraising, specifically foundational grants. And we're going to get into the differences between that and federal grants, kind of a buzz term right now. So really cool that we're talking about this avenue for fundraising. And we have an expert in the space. Lynn, you have the floor. Please tell folks, your company. And I know that I love my wife's an educator, and I know you used to be a school teacher, and I think it's such a cool origin story. So, but tell us about LMA Consulting, and then Jason and I are going to hit you with some pretty awesome questions, to be honest with you. And our audience will as well. So
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me. Just excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like I agree, the podcast conversation we had was great. I feel like you and I could have chatted for hours longer about fundraising. So I'm glad that I get to come back and we get to kind of continue that conversation. But yeah, just a little about myself. So my name is Lynn. I'm the founder of LMA Grant Consulting, where we work with nonprofits nationwide, specifically on grant strategy. So we have a team of writers who, in addition to myself, where we partner with these nonprofits and social impact organizations, and we do kind of the soup to nut support. So we are working with clients to identify those well-aligned funders, coach them on how to get a foot in the door with these funders, and doing the actual writing. And we do we have a few different ways of working with clients. So our main way is by developing this grant strategy and then implementing it with them. So working with them long term for 8-month contracts that they often renew with us for. We also work with clients to develop a grant action plan where we are working together to build the strategy and then training them how to implement it. And then we do some training as well for teams that are looking to upskill their development department. So, and just a little about myself. I mean, Trevor, you touched on that I used to be a teacher. So, I'm happy to kind of share that background of
yeah.
like how did I go from teaching to grant writing? So like you said, I went to school to be a teacher. But in 2012 to 2014, I spent 2.5 years in the Peace Corps. And for me, I was in the South Pacific. I was doing education and community-based projects in the country of Vanuatu. And it was the best experience of my life. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And for me, I left that experience having learned so many lessons. And I would say two of the big things were, one, the impact of cultural exchange and importance of cultural exchange and understanding, and two, the impact of truly community-driven nonprofits. And for me, when I left and came back to the US, I had this kind of change in heart where instead of teaching, I really wanted to focus on community-driven nonprofits and NGOs. And so I continued teaching for a little while, but at the same time went back to school and got an MBA in nonprofit leadership and eventually pivoted my career. And so, I spent some time working at a nonprofit in Boston where kind of all my worlds collided, where it was a nonprofit that was education focused, and we were teaching youth and adults about international issues related to the UN. And so it kind of felt like it was pulling all the things together. And one of the biggest parts of my role was grant writing. And what I realized when I was there and volunteering at other nonprofits was that a lot of times it's not that an organization doesn't have the know-how for grant writing, but it's a capacity issue. And
Yep.
so when I started this company in 2020, I went into it with that in mind, that my clients, it's a lot of times it's not that they don't know how to write grants, but they don't have the capacity. And so
Yeah.
by collaborating with us, they're able to offload that part of their work, but we work very collaboratively with them because our goal is to basically serve as an extension of their staff. We want the writing to sound and feel authentic, like it's coming from them. And that's how we approach our partnerships. It's very, very collaborative. We don't want to just take the work and walk away with it. We want to work side by side with them. So
I
yeah,
love that.
just a little about me and how I got into the space.
Keep
That's
going,
awesome.
keep going. I'm in.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Well,
great.
I
Thank
want to
you.
just, for those, everybody here that's listening and those on the recording and everything else, and please, we want any comments. And what my question is, talk to us about the difference between foundational grants and federal grants.
Please.
Help somebody like me. I hear grants and I just think that's one, kind of a blanket. There's a lot of stuff being talked about grants, federal grants in the news. Obviously, there's all these things. Give us a breakdown of the two different and what that means.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different grants out there. And I just want to make sure real quick, can everybody hear me okay? I
A little
usually
bit
like
better,
to
actually.
ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lynn. I can
A
hear
little
you
bit
fine,
better?
but thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
Ryan's,
great.
he's a stickler.
It's always good to ask. So yeah, there are different types of grants out there. So there are federal grants, there's state grants, there's also foundation and corporate grants. Federal grants, I will say, are the toughest. They are very complex. You have to apply to a specific agency, and you really have to be well versed in the specific kind of verbiage that they use, the scoring rubrics that they use. There's a lot of attachments required and really, really in-depth kind of evaluation metrics and reporting requirements. And with that said, there's also a lot of funding with the federal government. Now, it also goes without saying that a lot of that funding is in jeopardy right now, and everything is kind of changing every day. And so, there's a lot going on with federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
State funding, there's state agencies. Sometimes there's federal funding that is provided to a state agency, and then it's basically a pass-through fund provided by the state. But other times, it's not necessarily the same setup. What our company focuses pretty heavily on is actually the foundation and corporate side. So this is where we're talking about funders that are in the community, community foundations, family foundations, corporate foundations. Corporate foundations are, if you think of a bank or an insurance company, a well-known like retail business, they will often have a philanthropic arm where they're giving back to the community. So if you think of like Citizens Bank, everyone is familiar with like these big name banks. Citizens Bank has a Citizens Bank Foundation where they have this philanthropic arm where they're actually required to give back a certain amount to the community. And just like nonprofits, foundations have a mission of their own, and they have an area or like a sector that they care a lot about. So if you are, if you're thinking, oh, well, I should look at our local banks and apply for funding, there's a little bit more digging that you want to do first. You want to say, okay, well, let's look at the local banks. Let's look at their foundations. Let's then look and see what is their mission. Are they interested in education, healthcare, human services? And then what are they giving funding to? The nice thing about foundation and corporate grants, the way that they're different than federal funding, there's quite a few differences, but one of the big things is you can connect with an actual person, and it's actually a really good strategy to do that, to connect with a funder before applying.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I love that piece. Sorry for interrupting. It just gets me so excited.
No,
I want to double tap on that for sure.
Absolutely. It is important to funders to know who they're funding. They want to be a partner more than just an ATM. Whereas with the federal government, you're not really going to be able to sit down and have a coffee chat with the federal agency that you're applying for funding from. Whereas your local community foundation, they want to know what's happening in their own backyard. So it's okay to reach out and say, can we have a discovery call? There are also national foundations as well. So I'm talking about community foundations. Those are really local to specific regions, but there's also foundations that are national in scope. Those as well, any kind of funder, it's worth looking into, look on their website and see, do they have anything that says, we don't have capacity to meet with you before applying? If it says that, respect that, they mean it. You don't cross that line. But if not, there are, I'm sure we'll dive a little more into this, but there are strategies and steps that you can take to set up a discovery call, have somebody introduce you, make a connection. So it's a bit more of a personal touch when we're talking about those foundations versus federal funding.
Well, on that same, give us a little bit of color, if you would, around like a private foundation, because you talked about the corporate and the federal, and then the private foundations, the nuances to those as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so there's private foundations that are like family foundations and trusts. A lot of times, when we're thinking about different types of grant giving entities, I've been jumping around a little bit. I mentioned those community foundations, I mentioned the corporate foundations, but there's also these private family foundations and trusts where say there was a person who was particularly wealthy and they had a plan that when they were to pass away, that their money would go into a trust and their family would manage this trust. Or, that's one type of trust that exists where then the family manages grant applications and they say this person really cared about X, Y, and Z during their life. This is their legacy. They're living it on by giving to these organizations, and the families are managing grant applications. That's just one example. But there's also, family foundations that are, it's quite a few family members that are involved, and they say, we've decided to put these funds towards an area that we care about, maybe the environment, maybe animal welfare, whatever kind of is top of mind for that family. I would say also very similar. They're going to have a mission and values of their own. They're going to have a grant application process of their own. I will say sometimes a difference that I find with these private foundations versus community foundations or corporate foundations is sometimes they might be a little bit harder to find because they might not have a website, or kind of they might not be as like able to be
public
Googled.
and vocal.
As public and vocal. This is where I find it really helpful to use grant databases where we're using this other source to kind of hone in on who are the popular funders in this area. And that sounds kind of surprising, saying, how can a funder in today's day and age with the technology that we have not have a website? But that is pretty common, especially for private foundations. And luckily, if you're able to kind of narrow down who these funders are, you can also usually find out, well, what is their general process? There might be something in their 990 that says like, submit these documents, here is the contact person. And I like personally doing my deep research and seeing who have they funded in the past, at what amounts, can we find out what for, and things like that. So there's a little bit of like background digging that you have to do, but those private funders can sometimes be a little bit tricky to find.
Let me follow up with this question, Lynn. That database, that's just public knowledge? You have that on your site? Like, where is the best resource to just grab that info? I'm presupposing it's easy, but kind of give me some feedback there. Give the audience some feedback, please.
that's a good question. So I have kind of good news and bad news for that.
Okay.
So the good news is that there are some really incredible grant databases that are out there, that some that are very easy to use and user friendly. The bad part of it is that for the most part, they cost money. And so, you know, I would say the benefit for our clients when they work with us, they don't have to go out and purchase subscriptions to these, you know, expensive databases because we're already using
You
them.
have access.
So we have access to them. So to share what we use, you know, just to give you an idea, we use Instrumental. That's one of our top ones. Grant Station is also really great. We also use Inside Philanthropy, which I find to be an interesting one to get kind of a narrative background on, you know, some insights on the funder. A lot of times it gives you more than just like, what are the grants and how do you, you know, what are the eligibility requirements? But instead it says like, this funder is tricky to tap into, but here are some ways that you can do so. There's also Foundation Directory Online, and this is one that it can be very expensive, but it's often available at local libraries and like other places. So
that's awesome. Yeah. It's expensive.
So,
it's at the library. It's microfiche. No, I'm joking.
Check out your local library, see what you can find. A lot of state organizations will also, like state nonprofit networks will also offer access to this. So just to give you an example, in Massachusetts, Philanthropy Massachusetts is an organization that supports nonprofits in the state, and they, if you're a member, then through them you can access this grant database. So there's ways to access these grant databases sometimes if you don't have means. Google can only take you so far, and that's where it gets difficult to find, you know, those private funders especially.
Love it.
You know, we're talking about doing that. I was thinking about, there's a foundation where I live. It's called the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. And they started off with, you know, being basically a foundation for a family, and they've kind of brought in more and more foundations that they manage within the foundation. So it's like
smart.
And so they process all these grants and all these different things for that reason. And I think just like you were talking about in Massachusetts, don't you think that's something that if you just kind of look around, you might find that a lot of communities are going to have those organizations for that kind of stuff?
More than we realize, probably. More than we realize.
Lynn, one of the things that we talk about here a lot at HGA and all, you know, on the podcast webinars, are the fact that a lot of people that are fundraising professionals are just loaded down. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff on their plate. You know, 2.5 employees, I think, is the national average for full-time employees. And so that just tells you, that means a lot of them are,
they each wear 7 hats.
It's a power of one, you know, for a lot of stuff with all those things. So how does that, you know, give us some idea of the lowest, you know, what's the barrier to entry to go in and getting in the grant thing? Because if maybe I'm working, maybe mine's food insecurity and I'm running a pantry and I've got these things going on, I'm doing some good work, but I just really don't have a lot of bandwidth. Give us an idea what that looks like.
Yeah. So one strategy that I recommend to clients is developing what I refer to as a grant action plan. And so there's a couple pieces of it, but the end goal is that we're streamlining the grant process to take much less time and to narrow in on your goals. So when we are creating a grant action plan, one piece of it is creating what I refer to as a boilerplate grant template. I have found that, you know, we're applying for grants all over the place in different states for different sectors, public, private, et cetera. Every funder wants to create their own application. ask their own questions, but in reality, they're all asking for the same like 6 or 7 different areas of information. They just phrase it differently. And so what we recommend and what we do with our clients is we create this boilerplate template that will highlight those 6 or 7 different areas and create some foundational strategic language that you have that's just kind of ready to pull. And you can pull it and then modify it, adapt it so it's ready to, so that you can kind of use it to respond to that specific funder. But it's all housed in one place, because something that takes a lot of time is when you have to recreate the wheel every time you're writing a grant. And when some funders ask questions A, B, and C, and the other ones ask X, Y, and Z, and all of these bits and pieces of information exist in 20 different documents. And then you say, I know I answered a question like this at some point, but I can't remember where it was. Let me go through and find where I created language on this. It turns into this whole administrative nightmare where you just have too much going on. Yeah. So creating this boilerplate template that has foundational strategic language on different areas, including your organization background, your needs statement, why do you exist as an organization? What's the need that you're meeting? What are your program goals and objectives? What is the impact that you're having, and what are the metrics for success? So kind of thinking measurement and evaluation, your sustainability plan, and then having kind of a plan for how do you wrap this up? How do you tie this in with the funder and kind of align it with what they do? So what we do is we create this boilerplate grant. We make it really easy to be able to pull from and then adapt some of that language. The second thing is, take some time, maybe at the beginning of the year and then at the midpoint of the year, do some prospect research and identify those really well-aligned funders and create a grant calendar. Think about your capacity. How many grants per month do you feel like you have the capacity to do? When are there times of the year that maybe your team doesn't have capacity to write grants? And plan around that. Yep. When I create a grant calendar, I create it as a workflow document. So instead of putting a grant in the month that it's due, I put it in the month before it, or maybe even 2 months before it if it's particularly complex, because I want to look at the calendar and say, in this month, this is the work that I need to do. And the deadline is maybe the following month. And that gives me a little buffer time in case something needs some extra time. So creating this grant calendar, setting aside some time in the year to do that in-depth prospect research, and having a boilerplate template, this might take some time to get started, but once you have these pieces together, it makes your grant strategy process flow much easier. What I have found is by having a boilerplate template, it cuts the time right in half that it takes to write a grant. It's still going to take you time because you're still going to need to modify and adapt the language based on the way a funder's asking, but you have a starting place.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks, Doug, for the feedback. Thanks, Lynn. Amazing. Because I have a follow-up question for that. And Doug, appreciate you. When you said that you're a consultant, every great consultant, every great coach that we've listened to, Jason's a great coach, every great consultant and coach that I hear and respect says, of course, have this plan, have this, this action plan in place for sure. But I love that you just created this like roadmap for the year where it's like, okay, could you write one every month? Sure. All things being equal. Okay. But, but can you do it? And we were just like talking to our podcast consultant, and we had a lovely conversation with him. He's like, I love the idea of you doing this new segment weekly. He's like, but let's not do it weekly if you can't do it weekly, is basically what he was saying. He's like, can you do it? Like, can you commit to doing it monthly? It's like, Jason talks to folks about picking up the phone. It's like, can you make 3 phone calls a day? Or, they go, yeah, I can make 10. He's like, can you make 3?
Before noon.
It's just like, exactly. It's just like, and I just love that you tied that into grant writing, because I think there's just a lot of folks that have that fear of getting over the hump and like what I can and can, and it's okay. We're not telling you shouldn't do any. Right? We're giving you.
I've got a question, and this really kind of goes into this with technology and the buzzwords we're talking about, artificial intelligence.
Oh, great.
What are you seeing from your standpoint of how those things, because everybody hears about it and we use it in our company. I mean, I use Grok, Trevor uses ChatGPT.
It's an efficiency tool.
And I think, and I don't want, this is not to derail and go off it down the rabbit hole of that, but are you seeing any capabilities with that where that's helping with timeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this question because it's this crazy new tool that we have that 5 years ago we didn't. When ChatGPT came out, and for some reason in my brain I'm thinking it was a year ago, but it wasn't. I think it was like 2 years ago now.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
As a nonprofit, for the record, wild. Yeah, as a nonprofit. OpenAI started as a nonprofit. Very interesting.
Yeah, but it's not going to be for long.
No, yeah, I'm just saying. Very interesting though, doing that research. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, Lynn, but.
Oh, that's fine. Well, to be honest, when it first came out, I was nervous. I think, like many people, I felt like it was a little bit of a threat. I was like, oh no, are people going to replace grant writers with AI? Am I going to become obsolete? And how do I convince people that we're still important out there? And for a little while, I was too afraid to use it. And after a couple months of ChatGPT being out, I said, you know what? I need to put my big girl boots on and try this out and see what it's all about. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. I started using it, started kind of pushing it and testing it to see what can it be used for? Where is it good and where is it maybe not? I do find, as I was experimenting with it, that I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I was a teacher, I was a writing teacher. And
I know you were. Yeah. It's a great layup for what you do.
It worked out in a weird way.
Yeah, an awesome way.
Something that I noticed with ChatGPT is it feels very much like there's a formula. It feels like when I read a response from them, it's as if I've just taught my 4th grade students the structure of an essay and then they follow it exactly.
Copy paste. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And for me, when I read that, it feels very obvious that it's from ChatGPT. Now, I wouldn't recommend using ChatGPT to go ahead and write an entire grant, but what I have found it useful for is if there is a response that you're working on that you're like, this is really good, but like it feels like it's not flowing super well. Let me just take this paragraph and put it into ChatGPT and give it some really clear instructions and say, this is the question that I'm responding to. This is my draft answer. Can you help me make it flow better? That is a really good way to use it. And the way that I look at it is spell check is a tool that we've used for a long time. Yeah. And spell check is, in a way, like the same type of technology. It's correcting our language. It's helping us improve your spelling, your grammar. ChatGPT and AI in the same way, it's helping you as a tool to improve and tweak your language. Something that you want to be careful about is, when I've played with it in certain sections, every now and then, like I'll play with it and it looks like it kind of adds its own idea or a piece of information in there. This isn't a perfect tool. This is something that you use and you play with. And yes, I see Ryan just said, always proofread. Yes, always proofread it. Again, look at it as a tool. Even spell check sometimes doesn't know quite what you're trying to say and might make an incorrect correction. So in the same way, I see it as just another tool in the tool belt.
Well, I think that's the great point of it, because we all have this deal. It's going to rule the world. It's going to take over everything. It's going to, get the keys to the codes and nuke us all, and doesn't think we're necessary, and all this crazy stuff.
Got the red buttons. Yeah.
And I used it the other day to create some survey questions. I had these survey questions I wanted to do, and while it formatted it and it got it about 90%, but it's all it is. But that's how I see it. I just see it as a efficiency tool, not as a replacement by any means. So on that same vein, though, and you brought up something that was really important, and this is something we talk about a lot, is Doug referenced, we talk about it in the last session, time and blocking it and how to deal with it, because it's our most valuable commodity. So talk to us in this, we're talking, because I know that's the thing that I would start saying, okay, I'm going to try to put a grant ready. So I know nothing about writing grants. I've been doing fundraising for 30 years. I know nothing. So give me 3 things, like the top 3 things that I need to focus on before I do anything else, that you would say, okay, Jason, you don't know anything. Let's go 1, 2, 3. And I really don't know. So I want to become a grant writer.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say, number 1, let's assess whether or not your nonprofit is actually well positioned for success with grants yet. Because that, I cannot tell you how many times I've had a discovery call with a potential client, and we hop on the call and they say, Lynn, I'm so excited. We just received our 501c3 certification letter from the IRS yesterday. I have it in hand and we're ready to write grants. And I say, that is amazing. Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment. However, unfortunately, you are not yet well positioned for success with grants. Maybe you can legally apply for them, but you're going to be turned down. And it's frustrating, right? Like it's like, but I did the work. I got the paperwork in. Why can't I apply for funding? Newer nonprofits do a lot better with individual giving and major gifts than they do with grants. And so I'm often sending folks over to my colleagues who do individual giving consulting and are experts in that area. There's far fewer barriers when it comes to that type of funding. So you might say, well, Lynn, why aren't you in that type of fundraising? Well, it's important to diversify your funds. No matter what nonprofit you're running, eventually you want to have revenue coming in from more than one area, because you never want to rely on one source of income. So, are you well positioned? The 2 of the big things that I look at are, how long have you been running your programs for? I would say once organizations reach the 5-year mark, they suddenly become, of interest to a lot of these grant giving entities, way more fundable. Doesn't mean you can't be funded before then, but it's sort of a turning point for funders. The other thing is your budget size. So I have found that organizations with a budget of $500,000 and higher per year do the best with grants. Organizations with about $300,000, they still do well with grants, but sometimes that success rate goes down. The organizations with a budget below $100,000, these are the ones that I'm turning towards the individual giving consultants, because they're going to have the biggest challenge when it comes to finding success with grants. So, there's other areas, thinking about having your board in place and kind of all of the other startup processes for, making sure you're well positioned for grants. But number 1, are you well positioned?
Yeah.
Number 2, identify, what do you need grant funding for, and be very specific. A lot of times people will come to me and say, well, I want funding that's general operating. I want it to go to anything in my organization. And you and everybody else, unfortunately, general operating funds are what everybody wants, but it's the hardest to come by. So instead, I want you to really think deeply about, if you were to sit down with a checkbook and write a check to pay for something that your organization needs right now, what are you writing that check for? What's the greatest need for funding? Is it your staffing? Are there materials that you need to purchase? Is there a piece of technology that you're really in need of? What is the exact thing that you need? And then identify funders who are already supporting that need. So think about the program, think about what you're running. you know, if you are in need of program materials and you run a K through 12 youth organization, find a funder that is already aligned with that is funding K through 12 youth organizations in the same geographic area. I really want to point that out. You need to have that geographic alignment, and then apply there. What I'm trying to get at, I guess, is I see a lot of times organizations will see a fancy headline that says this funder is giving away $15 million, and immediately everyone's ears perk up and say, I want to apply for that.
Money. Yeah.
Dollar sign and all the zeros. However, you need to look at what is that funder, what is that funder's mission? What are their values? What are they funding specifically? Does it align with what you're doing? And so often I hear people say, well, we can create a program that aligns with what they're funding. And that is like the biggest red flag. Think about if you create a new program to appease a funder, and then you get the funding, suddenly you have to create a whole new program. Do you have the capacity to do that? And would that funding even be enough to cover all of the costs? So you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. Also, funders can usually see right through that if you don't have a program that exists and you're suddenly creating something just for them. So find funding that aligns with what you already need. The last thing I would say, so you said give you 3 pieces of advice.
Yes, please.
Make sure that you are well aligned, make sure that you, excuse me, well positioned for funds, make sure you're well aligned with the funder. And the last thing, build relationships with funders. So there's never a bad time to start building a relationship. I even tell sometimes, to organizations who might not be well positioned yet for funders, I say that does well positioned yet for grants, excuse me. That doesn't mean that you can't start building relationships now.
So smart. So smart.
To give you an example, oftentimes there are events where you might have a chance to meet other nonprofits and meet funders. In Massachusetts, they have these like meet the donor events where there's a panel of funders where you get to hear about what they support. And then at the end, you can meet them in person, kind of go up to them. And this is your opportunity to give your 2-minute elevator pitch. Find ways to meet with funders like that. Or if there's a funder like a community foundation in your area, reach out and say, hey, I'd love to have a coffee chat, or we're in the area, we're right down the street. Maybe we can meet up for coffee and I can introduce you to our programs. I'd love to just have a conversation. It doesn't need to be an ask. It can just be, I want to introduce myself. We're doing great work in your community. We'd love to get to know you. So building relationships with funders is so, so important. I will tell you, it tremendously helps your chances of being funded if the funder is familiar with you before you apply. So that was a long answer to
but it was so good.
Yeah, that was spot on.
Yeah.
It's real interesting because number one, I can't tell you how many people I've coached, and they're like, yeah, I want to go, we're going to have an event. We're going to do this, this, this. And I'm like, okay, well, how much money have you raised? Well, we've got $26,000. And I just go, look, that's great, but until you raise at least 100,000, if you can't raise 100,000 on the phone, you don't need to be having an event. That's you're putting the cart before the horse kind of thing. And that's exactly what you said. One of the things that it just kind of reiterates along with the way that we see that this is a marathon. And I think, as for nonprofit professionals, sometimes. Sorry,
everybody. Sorry.
We're definitely a for-profit company, but, we get this. Trevor and I battle back and forth with each other about this, not directly just with this. Okay. Yeah. We think, if we only do this, if we only, get this one thing to happen, it's all going to be a panacea after that. And it's all going to be wonderful. And we'll never have to worry again. It never works that way. It's always something else, just because I get this grant doesn't, I get this grant, it's going to fix everything and it's all going to be great, because it's always going to be something else.
Yeah.
And I think what I hear you saying is, number one, let's be realistic. Where are you at? Number two, be specific to what you do. Be
Yeah.
you know, true to yourself and to the mission of your organization. And then finally, it's still about who you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
And building those relationships.
Love that.
And
So
that is
good.
where really leveraging your board of directors comes in hand.
Well, yeah, please. Let's talk about
board
that. Get the board involved with this process. No one says that, Lynn. Yeah, good.
They're so important. And I'll be the first to say, I know it's hard to get your board involved sometimes. For 4 years, I was the board chair of a nonprofit. I still sit on that board as a board member. And, I know firsthand that sometimes it can be hard to engage your board. But here's the thing. People join a board knowing that they are going to be asked to do favors or to donate their time and do something to support the organization. So where your board can come in when it comes to grants is making connections. So when you're looking at a particular funder and you're saying, oh, this funder, they're in our community, they seem like such a great fit, do a little research, take a look at who are their trustees, who are their maybe board of directors or their staff, pull a list of names of their key people, share it with your board, and ask if anybody has any existing connections. And if they do, ask them to make an introduction. This seems, it sounds simple and it sounds like, oh, there's no chance there'll be connections. People are more well connected than you think, especially in the nonprofit space. And so ask your board, share these lists of names, especially if you have a really specific funder in mind, or if you have multiple funders, and ask for those introductions. Also, maybe some of your board members work for organizations like corporations that have a philanthropic arm. See what they can do to support the organization in that way. So say if you are an organization, I'm going to go back to Citizens Bank just because they were the bank we mentioned before, but say someone from Citizens Bank sits on your board. Well, maybe they can find out how to connect with someone at the Citizens Bank Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the corporation. And so, leverage your board, see what they can do. They do have a fiduciary responsibility to the board, usually to help fundraise. And this is part of that, even though it might look a little different. It's connecting with grant giving entities rather than maybe an individual. But it's really important to leverage your board.
Oh, good.
That's really
funny how it always comes back to the board lately. It's coming back.
Well,
to the
relationships,
board.
Something I was thinking, because we touched on the private foundations. The private foundations are just that. I mean, it's kind of funny because I've met people who they've used the private foundation in two ways. Number one, so that way, because people knew they had money. And so they go, well, that just doesn't fit our foundation's model.
Mm-hmm.
But two, they could always seem to make the model fit for the people that they wanted to fit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah.
And so it's back to those relationships. That money's out there.
That's a conversation.
Would you say, Lynn, that if you're probably on that, less than 5 years, the smaller group that a private foundation as well would be the place to really work for if you're doing that?
Yeah, have a conversation. It's never going to hurt to just have a conversation. And you could even ask them point blank and say, this is where we are as an organization. Do you think we are in a place that we could apply for funding from you? And if not, when would you recommend that we do that? It's also nice, people in philanthropy are well connected. So you can even ask them, do you have recommendations for anybody else that we should connect with now that you've learned a little about my organization?
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, we have this idea that they don't want to give the money away. That's exactly what they want to do.
Yes.
I mean, it's there because they're looking to fund, they're looking for new people. And I have a friend of mine that works at the foundation I spoke of here locally. And she gets all giddy about it. I mean, she literally, when they have somebody that they get, oh my gosh, we just got a new grant application. I'm so excited about these guys. You know, I mean, she's excited about it, wants it to happen. And I think that you'll find with those relationships, that's what they're going to do. Well, maybe this is not what we do, but you know, we're more into, you know, ours is educate. Our foundation's really dialed to education. Obviously, you're more in food insecurity. So I think you need to go talk to so-and-so.
Yeah.
I think, and I hear that's what you're saying, Lynn. And
yeah, that's that alignment you're talking about.
I really appreciate that kind of a feedback because, you know, it's about making those connections. It is who you know, and it's okay. Go out there and talk to people. Ask those questions because nobody's gonna. I've never heard anybody get blackballed on a grant because you ask a question, and it feels like there's this fear, this holdback from doing certain things, especially in fundraising. Well, I don't want to offend. You don't want to make somebody upset. Like you're not gonna make if you ask for somebody for money, they're not going to be upset. They may not say yes just because they don't say yes, but they're not going to go, wow. I was kind of cool. They came and asked me for $10,000 like they think I've got it. Well, I don't, but that's nice.
People are deathly afraid to ask for money, and it makes sense. It's kind of like in your nature as a person, like it feels weird to ask for money, but when it comes to fundraising, and especially with a grant giving entity, they exist to be asked for money. They expect it. That's the whole purpose of why they're there. And so it's okay. And you have to kind of be a little bit bold and brave in those moments. And I will say, you know, going back to the grant writing itself, that's why you also want to be as direct as you can, like right at the beginning of an application. It might feel like, oh, I have to sort of, you know, put a lot of fluff and beat around the ask right at the beginning. Say, you know, we kindly request $50,000 from your organization, and this is how we're going to use it. Put that ask up top because they know you're asking. Don't make them search for what you're asking for.
They know there's an ask in there. Let them know right from the beginning. That's great.
Absolutely. And Trevor,
anybody have any questions? So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was just saying, I think I lost Trevor.
Oh no, I said, hey, I didn't write that. It's like, but I'm such a huge believer, Lynn. We appreciate you so much because you speak the same language that we, of course, align with. And you're applying this language of fundraising to grant writing. I think it's amazing. You're the only person in this space that has said, and I'm really, really grateful that you're sharing it with us again, that has said, hey, have a conversation with these folks. Also stewardship. Keep them updated the whole time because guess what? They can give again, and you might not even have to apply for a grant to get it. I mean, if you do a great job, it's right there. I mean, it's weaving in the relationship piece, and maybe you had this conversation to start the whole thing off 24 months ago. Great. Like it's just like it's so glass half full to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know, I appreciate you saying that too, of just why and how it's so important to steward funders and you know, don't just get the check and then forget about them.
You can't go radio silent. You can't go radio silent. Yeah, you got me so
radio
excited.
Silent.
Yeah.
And remember that a funder can give more than once. They might give year after year, but you have to keep them updated. You have to keep them close by, give them, you know, let them know how things are going.
Thank them. You could thank them. There's that piece, you know.
Right. You know, the work that I've been doing today, right before this call, we just started working with a new client who has been applying for grants, at least for the last year. They've been working on their grant strategy. And the first thing that I'm doing as I'm helping them build and expand their grant strategy is as I create their new grant calendar, I'm making a historical grant calendar. I'm going through and looking, who did you already apply to? And I want to look at and add them to the calendar because I want to know who has already funded you. Who can we be following up with? Who are the renewal grants that we don't want to let slip through the crack? And when our reports due, you know, we want to look historically at what's already being done. When we come in and we work with a client, we know that we're not starting necessarily from scratch. You've already been doing a lot of the work, but we don't want to forget about that. We don't want to say, well, we received 25,000 from them like a year ago, but that, so time to look for a new funder.
We got the check. Yeah. It's like, yeah. Oh man. Go ahead. Sorry, Lynn. Sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just saying it's complete opposite. You want to build that relationship.
I sat in a board meeting as an invite, an annual board meeting, just to for folks to bounce some ideas, because of course we need to engage the board. That is just so synonymous with so many organizations right now with what we're hearing. Another topic for another day, right? Another webinar where we could focus on that, but it's just being spoken to ad nausea. So I'm talking to the founder and in front of the board as well. And they're talking about identifying new projects. They build trails, really cool community thing. It's like you can see it, feel it, get on the trails, work on the trails, invite people to the trails. It's a really cool community thing. So it's kind of obvious the tie in there. And I'm identifying where they've gotten funding before. And there was one private family foundation in our town. They just happened to be in my town, my area. And they gave them three, I want to say $50,000 grants to get them going with a few different projects a couple of years ago. And they spent time talking about how that foundation, which tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars possibly, foundation capacity, they were talking about where they're spending their money right now and how they were a little jealous, or they felt bad, or they're not giving us any money right now or anything like that. And I said, well, have you spoken to them? Have you picked up the phone? Have you asked? I mean, it's like they gave you $150,000 3 or 4 years ago. They're right here, right now. It's like, It was just so obvious. And they're lovely people. I wasn't saying, hey, get your head out of the sand, but it's like, wow. It's just so
Have you invited them to an event?
There you go. Yeah. I mean, so much opportunity there. So, hey, full circle, we could keep having this conversation, like you said.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to pop this up so quick, but I did.
Hey,
I didn't want to take it back down. I hit the button accidentally. So, it's time to give something away real quick, and I'm going to do that. But Lynn, really, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening. There's, some of the things that you keyed on, like the size and about the specificity and those relationships is so important. And I had no idea. So I really appreciate that. So we've got a winner.
Awesome.
Reagan Thompson.
All right. Reagan.
Screen, get the spin going.
Thanks for coming.
All right.
That's awesome.
We're going to see what Reagan is going to make some money with.
Reagan, share with us where you're from and who you're
Holy
serving.
Smokes, Costa Rica.
Oh, that's fun. Costa Rica's cool. And Costa Rica raises a lot of money. Well, congrats. That's really cool. So, we'll have to figure out a way where our guests can spin the wheel someday, where Lynn could get involved in spinning the wheel. All right. In Greenville. All right. The Warehouse Theater. All right.
Warehouse Theater. That's awesome.
All right. Well, we'll be in touch.
We'll get some information. We'll get some information over to you, Reagan, on how you can get that and do it. Hey, real quick, we're talking about coaching. If you need some help, if you want to, pop on just coaching, you can go to hgafundraising.com, sign up. There's no obligation. It's free. And would love to help you with your fundraiser.
Hey, an obvious plug too is that, please reach out to Lynn, anything grant consult, anything of that nature.
We're going to put her on the email. We send this recording out, by the way. And that way you can just reach out to Lynn, and you've got, it's right there on the LMA grantconsulting.com. Please give her a call. And I think that, if you're not sure, maybe if you're really doing that, I think that'd be the kind of conversation Lynn would love to have with you. And
please reach out.
Maybe, it doesn't fit, or she can connect you with somebody who could.
I was going to say something very interesting though, Jay, I thought about it, but hey folks, if you need to do a people exercise, which is what we call it, with your board, engaging your board, getting your board to, like Lynn said, get the people, identify the people in your area that can give. Who knows those people? Jason invented this exercise called the people exercise, where you can literally identify these folks that your board can have conversations with, that your development team can have conversations with. It's called the people exercise. It's worth your time. And Jason mentioned it's free. I'm not plugging us. This is the truth. If you click on and QR code that little button on the screen right there, or what have you, the image, you can sign up for a free coaching session with Jason. He can walk you
just go
through
to the
that.
calendar, book it, and
It's raised folks so much money. It's great just to understand how you could access all those people and those relationships that you have right in front of you. So, sorry, I had to get that out, but yeah, good stuff. Lynn, you rock. Can't thank you enough. Seriously.
Thanks everybody for coming too. Yeah. Thanks everybody for spending time with us. We really appreciate it.
Do us a favor and make good on that promise that we asked you to make at the beginning, and show Lynn some love on LinkedIn, and follow all the good stuff that she's doing. And thank you so much for the time, Lynn. We'll have you on again, of course, at some point in the future too.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. I want to hear what 4, 5, and 6 are, Lynn.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristen.
Everybody.
All right. Appreciate you. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Thanks, Calvin. See ya, everybody.